So for today's video, I really want to talk about cancel culture. I've been thinking about cancel culture a lot, specifically in the influencer, YouTuber space. There's so many other spaces we can talk about cancel culture, especially with TikTokers, with celebrities, considering that cancel culture began with celebrities. But I want to talk about some of the people that I feel like I've been questioning a lot lately as to how they were able to get away pretty much unscathed from all of their scandals. I'm not going to get super deep into these people, but I'm going to talk about cancel culture more at large, and I'm going to kind of use these people as a springboard to get into that discussion. I think it's pretty clear that when we're thinking about cancel culture and we're thinking about the nuances of it, there's a lot of, very obvious reasons for why it might work or not work. I actually posted on my community tab asking you guys if you feel like cancel culture works. And you guys largely voted that cancel culture sometimes works. It depends on the case. And I can say for the most part, I agree with that. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump into it.
I'm gonna tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life. Would you please stop? Sir, I'm asking you to stop.
Please don't come close to me.
So section 1, what even is cancel culture? So cancel culture was created to hold people with large platforms accountable when they do just really awful, heinous, debaucherous kind of stuff, Like that's why it was created. So I want to touch on some YouTubers that honestly, to this day, it really baffles me how they've been able to come back from their scandals and how they basically migrated to new platforms. And they have a whole other audience of people that have no idea what they've done, right? Or people that are too young to really understand the implications or the severity of their actions. So we're first going to start with James Charles. We're going to do a little overview of James Charles. So James Charles was once the face of Gen Z beauty. James Charles was everywhere. He was doing all kinds of makeup tutorials, collaborating with all kinds of people, celebrities, other influencers doing makeup and just, literally all over the beauty community. But in 2019, he got swept up in what we like to call Dramageddon, which was a massive fallout with Tati Westbrook, his former mentor. And Tati accused him of inappropriate behavior with men, particularly boys, okay, like young boys, and also with straight men. So he was in a whole lot of mess with that. And this isn't even it's not even drama. Like, this is a crime, but we call it drama. But anyway, all right, so that was like a huge crux of that first wave of Dramageddon. He lost millions of subscribers overnight, like 2 to 3 million subscribers from that fallout where she called him out. James then came back with his rebuttal and defended himself and explained that he wasn't aware of these boys' age and all these kinds of things. Basically kind of, stuck in high school. His mentality was very high school oriented. It's like, no, you're in your early 20s and these are children. But anyway, YouTube temporarily demonetized him for all of this stuff and he lost his partnership with Morphe and several other brands. But now we fast forward to 2025 and James Charles now has a still pretty active YouTube channel, a pretty successful channel. He may not be exactly at the height he once was, but he's still pretty close. And he's also on TikTok. He's launched his own brand. It feels like he's just been able to resurrect himself and he's kind of on this apology. He's been on this sort of like apology kick where he's trying to rehabilitate himself and learn from his past mistakes. And I mean, the kind of things he did, it's just like the fact that that got swept under the rug is crazy to me. Next, we're going to talk really briefly about Jeffree Star. So Jeffree Star is pretty intertwined with James Charles's nonsense and that whole Dramageddon and Karmageddon thing. But Jeffree Star's controversies go way back, way before then. There's been claims of racism, behavior, bullying. He tried to apologize for his past comments, but people were just done. That really just destroyed his reputation and all of his bad actions just really caught up to him. Again, Jeffree Star's infractions were really insane and really awful for so many reasons. But fast forward to today, he is in Wyoming. He is raising yaks. He started his own beauty brand called Jeffree Star Cosmetics. He shows his behind the scenes ranch content. He has over 15 million subscribers. He doesn't really post much on YouTube, but he's basically found a brand new audience on TikTok. You know, he has a thriving, you know, career on TikTok. He basically took everything from YouTube and went straight to TikTok. So that is Jeffree Star in a nutshell. I do want to add though that he hasn't necessarily been welcomed back by the beauty world, but he's kind of created his own ecosystem, right? Like he's created his own ecosystem on TikTok. So it doesn't really matter because everything that happened back in like the late 2010s, early 2020s, it's like, it's pretty much irrelevant to him now, especially with the new brand he's been able to curate on TikTok with a bunch of young people who probably are not aware of what he's done or anything of the sort. So the next person I want to get into is Shane Dawson. Now, Shane Dawson is also part of this trifecta of just nastiness, right? You got Jeffree, you got James, you got Shane. You know, Shane, like some of the stuff Shane did was insane. I mean, like his cancellation hit really hard in 2020. A bunch of racist, you know, videos and jokes came to the surface where people were reanalyzing all kinds of things he had done back in the 2010s. He also made very disgusting comments about minors. Willow Smith is one of the most high profile people he talked about. It was just gross, like what he was doing with Willow Smith. And then you got Jaden Smith, big bro Jaden, and Jada Pinkett Smith called him out, which just added fuel to the fire. And he was basically encouraging Tati Westbrook to go after James in this whole Dramageddon situation. So he was being an instigator as well as just being super problematic in his own right. And so that was pretty terrible. He then took a long break and he came back in 2021. You know, he posts occasionally like with mini documentaries, you know, podcasts here and there. You know, his views are much lower than before. Like he hasn't fully come back, but he basically has returned and has his own little ecosystem. So again, like a lot of these people have their own little ecosystem. All right, last person that I really want to get into that I want to touch on briefly before I get into like the other stuff is Logan Paul. Now, Logan Paul to me, like obviously both the Paul brothers, but Logan Paul especially really baffles me simply because of the whole controversy with the suicide forest. I mean, that really makes no sense to me that he was able to come back from that. I literally do not understand how Logan Paul was able to come back from that. So basically, if you don't know about the whole suicide forest thing with Logan Paul, this happened in early 2018 where he filmed a video of himself in the, what we call the, you know, to say these stupid code words to not trigger YouTube's algorithm, but the unalive forest, right? Where basically you have a lot of people in Japan, they will go into this forest to take their lives for many different reasons. He went in there and he filmed a dead body and broadcasted it to his millions of followers. And he was laughing and it was just a whole joke to him. And he delivered an apology saying, "I'm sorry." And basically, he was quiet for a little bit and now he is super successful. I mean, he has his podcast Impulsive. He's a WWE wrestler. Like, he basically came back from everything. He launched an energy drink with KSI. Like, he's done so many different things. And it's so crazy because I feel like he's just a reformed business savvy creator now. He's seen as that. And I'm just like, I will never understand how he was able to get away with that. It's not like he was some kid, like 12-year-old who did that. He was in his 20s. He was freaking like 22, 23 when that happened. I don't understand how he got away with that. There's a whole lot of other stuff that Logan and honestly Jake Paul have done. But again, I don't want this video to be about all of these people's scandals. I want this video to be more about like the implications of this kind of stuff. So I think my thing with cancel culture and like doesn't really work is it makes me think about these social media platforms. With all the people I just named, for the most part, majority of them have been able to recover, come back, and have pretty successful careers post their scandals. There's so many more people that I could mention as well, but you know, this video would be like 20 hours long if I mentioned every single problematic influencer that we've seen on YouTube. But I think something that I notice is that a lot of these social platforms, specifically YouTube, isn't really built for accountability. These platforms are built for engagement, right? They don't exist to uphold moral standards. They exist to get you to stay on the platform. Even though, you know, a platform like YouTube has instituted ad suitability, where if your videos are palatable for advertisers and all this kind of stuff, that's really not for the protection of audiences. That's for their own bottom line, right? And so it makes me think a lot about how these platforms are really there to get you to stay on, to get you hooked, rather than to uphold the proper moral code. And this isn't to say that these platforms, like, of course, YouTube is around, like, has done so many great things. Creators have used their voices for so many things on YouTube and all kinds of platforms. So I don't want to make it seem like, oh, all social media platforms, all they do is just keep you engaged. No, but you know, even though there's been a lot of positive change, and when a lot of people are aware of someone who's problematic, that really can help everyone collectively decide not to support that person anymore, it still seems like even when that's decided, it's very temporary and it's very fleeting. I think the thing that kind of is hard for me to reconcile sometimes is that the more we talk about someone, it feeds the algorithm, it feeds content, it feeds that person's, their status. You know, I think obviously this has worked negatively for people. I mean, look at Diddy. Diddy is a perfect example of social media doing their due diligence and getting this man to be ousted. I mean, he is 100%, you know, being held accountable for his actions, or is being, you know, regarded the way he is for a reason. And I'm grateful for that. And social media is a big part of that. You know, people have been sounding the alarm on social media for years, and it finally picked up enough steam, and as well as the raids and all kinds of stuff. So it went from social media to the actual law, which is what we want, right? Like, that's the ideal scenario. I feel like I'm thinking as I'm talking, even though I had thoughts that I've outlined, I'm thinking about it as I'm speaking. And I think a big thing to just kind of question is, it's not that cancel culture doesn't work all the time, or that, I don't think it's about whether cancel culture works. I think the question is like when it works and who it's for, and why is it so inconsistent. I think another issue, like with social media platforms, is I think there's really no system for accountability. I think a lot of times when these influencers do crazy things, these YouTubers do awful things, there's no real formal system to kind of strike them. It's like, oh, you can get demonetized, but then you can come back, you can appeal. And you've already gained such a huge audience and fan base that the algorithm just wants to promote that person because they're causing so much traffic. So the next sector of this that I was thinking about is that when institutions are involved, it gets harder to cancel a person. I think, like, if you are a celebrity or an influencer who's tied to a major machine, a label, or whatever the case may be, a management company, when you are tied to that, I think sometimes it can get harder to fully cancel someone. I mean, in these cases, a lot of times, like, these agencies or whatever will drop the person they're representing because it's bad PR, and they themselves probably don't support what they've done. So that happens. But I think also there's situations where they're losing. I mean, you have this agency that's losing millions of dollars. You have this company that's losing millions of dollars, you know, because of this person's scandal, and they might try to salvage their investment. So they might try to clean up your image. They have you go on a PR cleanup tour, you know what I'm saying? Because they have millions at stake. I think oftentimes when someone has a lot of power, James Charles was seen as YouTube's golden boy, right? So even though he was doing a lot wrong, he still was being largely protected by YouTube. I feel like a lot of, you know, creators that are really good business, they could do all kinds of crazy things, but because they are the golden standard, they're protected. So the next thing I want to discuss is what happens when the outrage dies. So when the outrage dies, when things calm down, what happens after that? I think most cancellations, they don't last, they just go quiet. I kind of feel like the internet really thrives off immediacy, right? So, you know, you want to see something happen right away, but the news cycle, especially nowadays, is so fast. So you'll see something happen with a person, and then next week it's another scandal. It's another scandal, then another scandal, then another influencer did this, and another influencer did that. And then there's so many different platforms. So you're seeing all these different platforms of people doing crazy things, and it's just a constant cycle. And I also think that creators themselves, a lot of these problematic creators themselves, know that people forget, and they've seen it happen so many times with so many other influencers before them, right? So they see that people are fickle and that people forget, so they will disappear for a few months, they'll scrub their feeds, they'll do what they gotta do, they'll lay low for a bit, and then they'll come back. They'll return as if nothing happened, and it works, you know, because it's a very strategic return. A lot of times I've noticed with a lot of these influencers or YouTubers, like, I've noticed that they never make like a grand re-entrance. They just start slowly posting the same content again, right? Because they don't want to draw attention to the controversy. They want to pretend like it didn't happen. So they will return as as if nothing happened. Quiet little podcast drop here, quiet video here, quiet post here. And that's their way of signaling like, hey, I'm coming back. I'm gonna test the waters to see how it is right now. And then they'll try to rebrand it as growth or healing. Okay, I grew from this situation. Okay, this is what this situation taught me. I mean, James Charles is on that tour, you know, of like, this is what it taught me. And they just do such a crazy rebrand, but there never seems to be genuine accountability and genuine remorse for what they've done. I also think platform hopping, which I touched on a little earlier, is a big part of this. You know, if there's a scandal over here on YouTube, they're gonna move over to TikTok, right? If TikTok is too hot, they'll start posting on Instagram Reels. I think if social media feels unsafe, then they're gonna hop over and start a podcast. You know, it's like a constant cycle of hopping here, hopping there, because they can reinvent themselves and there's a brand new audience waiting for them on another whole platform. And you know, this isn't to say that I think that once someone gets canceled, they should stay canceled. I do believe in redemption. I believe in repentance. I believe that people should get a second chance if they're earnest enough, if they're genuine, and if they come with a pure heart. I do think that that is supposed to be allowed, and I do feel like sometimes the internet can be very unforgiving, and sometimes some people, even if they kind of try to start anew or do something else, people just want to stay hung up on what they did, you know, 10, 15 years ago or whatever the case may be. Again, I think the crime that they committed or the thing they did wrong should be measured in this, but I also have seen instances where, you know, some people just won't let certain people let it go, if you know what I mean. I'm just thinking of a random influencer off the top of my head. I don't know if y'all knew Brother Nature or Kelvin. He was the deer guy who'd be like, hey, Canela.
Yo, Canela, what's up with you, Canela? You can't just be rolling up to my car like that, Canela. You already know what's up, man. I was driving, see my girl Canela, so she had to pull up on me real quick.
He was propped up to be like a new age type of Steve Irwin. I mean, no one could like compare to Steve Irwin, you know. Steve Irwin's son, by the way, is really killing it. Steve Irwin's son is incredible. But a lot of people loved Brother Nature, you know, and his persona. He had a lot of issues. He had a lot of little things that I think took away from his image, but the nail in the coffin for him was a fight that he got into at like a pizza shop or at some shop where he claimed to have been beaten up, and someone just picked a fight with him out of nowhere. But turns out he's the one that actually started the fight. And, you know, once people found this out, they were just done with him. They were like, you know what, you're not who you said you are, you know, because he had such a positive image. And like him being the one to instigate, just people were like, you know what, we're done with this cocky kid that got too big for his britches, you know what I'm saying? And people still to this day, this happened over 5 years ago, people still to this day comment on his post saying, we ain't forget, we ain't forget. And quite honestly, I think a lot of factors went into his demise, I guess, in terms of social media virality or fame. But I think had he just apologized, and he even admitted in an interview that had he just apologized, I think things would have blown over. And that's the thing. I think he got really arrogant with everything that happened, and I think he got too in his head, and instead of just apologizing and coming forward, he wanted to stay on this unbothered tip and basically not address it. But he's just a random example I thought of, because even though he wasn't like the best or the cleanest, he really wasn't that bad. I think he was just his ego, you know? I also think it's just important to mention that a lot of these platforms just do not have a centralized place for accountability. It's like all of these platforms have different measures for what they deem inappropriate or deem wrong or deem cancelable. And so it's really hard to kind of pin someone down, you know, fully, because every platform is different. And every platform has just different audiences. Like TikTok's audience and consumer base is very different than Instagram. YouTube is incredibly different from TikTok and Instagram. Like short form content versus long form, it's a completely different ball game. So there's that aspect as well. And I just think some people are just way too profitable to just completely kick off the grid. Like I think about James Charles, he was YouTube's golden boy. Like he really was one of the golden boys of YouTube. I think that's why he was able to get away with what he got away with for so long, because YouTube was protecting him. He was being protected. He was being insulated. So kind of the last point I want to draw with this topic is that shamelessness wins online, okay? If you are shameless, if you don't if you lean into the drama, that can work. You know, you got people like Trisha Paytas, you know, that she's somebody where it works for her. She leans into the drama. She leans into the problematicness of her, you know, persona. You have a lot of celebrities who do this as well. They lean into being problematic, and that works for their brands. So it's really It's really interesting how that works. And again, at the end of the day, real accountability requires genuine remorse, right? And I think another thing is like you have a lot of audiences that sometimes will stand 10 toes down behind a creator that is very shameless, right? They're like, you know what? Don't let the machine mess you up. Don't let the outrage, bother you, stay unbothered, do your thing. Like they people who may not have the brightest critical thinking skills will stick behind somebody and their persona because they stood 10 toes down in their nonsense. It's like they owned the fact that they're a dramatic mess and they honor that, which is so crazy and weird and parasocial, but that's a whole thing. So that's something else I noticed too, is like the shamelessness wins and the audiences don't care. I think another creator, Colleen Ballinger, I mean, she had her whole cancellation in 2023, yet she's still, posting and doing her thing and has her little ecosystem. There's so many people, there's so many more people I could mention because it's just a freaking like flood of people who have done terrible things, from celebrities to influencers, but I'm kind of keeping it to a few people here because that's all I can handle at the moment. So for my last section, what would real accountability truly look like? Personally for me, I don't think it's about exile, depending on what the person did, of course. Again, if you're like a Diddy, then yeah, good riddance, okay? If you're like a Diddy, if you're like a Jeffree Star, good riddance, whatever, it's fine. But I do think that people should have honest repentance, change behavior, and there should be a genuineness. Instead of trying to save face or save your brand deals or save your income, you need to genuinely show that you are remorseful for what you've done and that your head's not in the clouds. Just say, you know what? This is what happened. People are upset because I did this. I own up to it. This is what my mindset was when I did this. It's not an excuse. It's just an explanation. But either way, there's no excuse for what I've done. I'm doing X, Y, and Z in order to improve and to change and to really learn and educate myself. And I want to make sure that I don't repeat anything like this ever again, and that yada, yada, yada. Like, just be honest and just be sincere, So basically, to wrap this all up, I just really wanted to kind of talk about cancel culture at large. I think it's a very nuanced discussion, and there are probably tons of other things that I could have touched on that I did not, but that's why the comment section is there. So y'all can share your thoughts and also talk about what you think with cancel culture. Do you think it works? What does true accountability look like in the digital age? I'm actually very curious to hear, like, what does true accountability look like in this digital age that we're in today? And how can we foster that across all platforms, not just one or two or none, So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this little, conversation. Please feel free to share in the comments. Keep the comments respectful, keep them productive. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.